and welcome to Dipping and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm very fortunate this morning to not have one, two, three, four, five, six guests this morning, first time ever. So good morning to Anna, Matthew, Nasra, Joe, Mollie and Chloe. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
And I think I will start with Anna, and if Anna wants to tell us a bit about what she does and where she works, etc. So good morning, Anna.
Morning, Lucy. Lovely to be on. So my name's Anna Gatehouse and I'm the Business Development Manager here at Pier Training. Been involved in sort of the initial launch of what we're going to talk about today.
Fabulous, thank you. And Matthew?
I work for SafeNet, which is one of the organisations that's accessing the apprenticeship scheme that Anna's just mentioned about. I oversee our outreach provision in Lancashire.
Fabulous, not far from me. Then I'm only in South Manchester, so we're
not far at all. No, just down the motorway.
Just down the road. Nasra, good morning.
Morning. Hi, my name is Nasra Omar. I'm the Protective Services Tutor for Peer Training.
Fabulous, thank you. And Joe?
Morning, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. I'm Joe. I'm Head of Training here at Women's Aid, and I've been working with Anna in terms of rolling out the apprenticeship to particularly our member organisations.
Fabulous, thank you. And Chloe?
Hi, I'm Chloe Martin and I work for Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service as a children's domestic abuse specialist, and I am currently taking the apprenticeship that we're talking about today.
Amazing. And finally, last but not least, Mollie.
Yeah, I'm Mollie Warby, and same as Chloe, work for NDAS as a children's domestic abuse specialist, and we're currently about to complete the apprenticeship.
Amazing. And considering what we're talking about in terms of the podcast, this is a very, very amazing group of people I have here. I'm very fortunate. So I was going to start off with Joe and ask a bit about how the apprenticeship came to be, because obviously that's what we're here to discuss, and a little bit more about that, if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. So I joined Women's Aid about 18 months ago. And so one of the things I first picked up was the apprenticeship. And so my predecessor had, I think, worked on this for many years beforehand. And there was a trailblazer group. So it's basically a group of individuals who kind of spot an opportunity to create what they call a standard. And they predominantly were our member organisations. I think there was about 8 or 9 of them, and they came together on a regular basis to look at the skills, knowledge and behaviours that individuals would need to demonstrate to show that they could, I guess, work effectively with survivors in the sector. So I came in, picked it up. I think the standard at that point had just been approved on the national framework. And so it was kind of my role to look at how do we actually deliver this apprenticeship now we've kind of got approval to do it. And we were approached by Pier. They're obviously a very well known, very well respected apprenticeship provider and deliverer. And so it made sense for us that Pier would be the lead organisation at that time to deliver the apprenticeship. So it's good. It's good to see that it's been rolled out, and it's certainly raising standards across the sector, which is great to see.
That's incredible. And it's so important because, again, we know we come back to this all the time. And I come back to this in episode after episode where people will talk about domestic abuse. And for many, I know I've had listeners who've contacted me saying, I didn't even realise what I was experiencing was domestic abuse because I thought it was all physical. I thought it was violence. And so changing that landscape and that narrative around what domestic abuse actually looks like in terms of all the other elements, emotional, psychological, etc. It's so, so important. So obviously this apprenticeship is a massive, massive step, not even step in the right direction. It's an entire leap forwards. And Anna, a little bit more from you, please, about how it's working in terms of working with Women's Aid and the apprenticeship in general. How's it all going?
Yeah, extremely well. I mean, we were absolutely delighted to partner with Women's Aid. I think when it came to market, which was April 24, we'd seen that it would be available. But our first cohort launched in October 24, which obviously Mollie and Chloe were part of. But it's just gone from strength to strength. And what we've tried to do is obviously make sure that we're always delivering it as it was intended to be. So develop some really close working partnerships with Women's Aid, with Joe and the training team there, but also, regular communication with the wider network. So we're regularly promoting it on sort of virtual coffee mornings. We've attended their national event. And we're doing that again this year, just to really spread the word that it's available. So it's an 18-month program, and it's been designed really to sort of meet that national standard, as Joe's explained. So we launched it. We've took on some amazing tutors, Nasra being one of them, and that is growing. We've actually just recruited another tutor because it's going so well. But they will obviously have come in with the specialist skills and the knowledge to be able to deliver the content. So you'll obviously have had ISVA training previously, and that still exists, more sort of short, intense courses. But the apprenticeship has really been designed to embed that knowledge and skills over a period of time.
Yeah.
So because it's the 18-month program, it's about the learners, learning, seeing, doing, and then that reflection piece. And I think that's really why it's been so successful. And we've had an amazing uptake. And when we've got numerous employers on board now, from SafeNet has been one of our main uptake from SafeNet in terms of cohorts coming on, regular cohorts, but local authorities, local councils, NHS trusts, where Chloe and Mollie are working from, housing associations, and then smaller charity independents, and obviously the whole of the Women's Aid network this has been promoted to. So it's going really well. And obviously we're coming to the end of the first cohort. So I'm sure Chloe and Mollie will sort of tell you about their experiences, but a really, really exciting time for us to see that full cycle from launch and inception right through to our very first achievers coming through. So lots to shout about.
That is a lot to shout about. And again, something that comes up in the podcast a lot and that we talk about with various professionals and victims and survivors is, to take a moment and say, having this as a conversation on social media and doing it in a way where it's educating people as well, it's so important. And I think hopefully when we do it like this, it makes it more accessible for people. And for a lot of victims and survivors, they often think, I would love to give back. I've been supported by my local service. I would really love to give back, and I don't know how to go about it. And sometimes for a lot of people, it can be something that they do as a career later in life. It doesn't matter, does it? That's what I love about all of this, is there's no kind of age restriction. A lot of people think, well, I'm a bit older now, so I'm going to have to think about what I'm going to do. Whereas actually, very often with a lot of lived experience and life experience, we have so much to offer people. And in Nasra, in terms of the overview of the program and delivering it, how is it going?
Yeah, it's been going really good, really, really well, actually. So the program is run in sessions, monthly sessions, either afternoon or morning sessions. And then in those sessions, then we deliver the actual training. So, for example, there might be a session on trauma-informed practice. We look at things around safeguarding, where we look at both safeguarding adults and children. So there's 10 sessions that the cohort will do together. And then the 3 sessions, so session 11, 12, 13, where the cohort will go in and do their own pathway. So they choose the pathway prior to starting the apprenticeship. So it might be ISVA, or children and young people. So they'll do the sessions that are specific to their pathway. And then from session 14 and 15, which is towards the end of the apprenticeship, we then start coming together. And that's where we start looking at the portfolio, which is like witness testimonies that they would have had throughout the apprenticeship. There would have been journals that they would have been doing. So there's 6 hours of journaling that the apprentice has to do every week. So that's around 24 hours per month. They can go over that, and sometimes a lot of them find that they've gone over that for the month because of the amount of work that they're doing anyway. There's a lot of assignments. We do a lot of presentations and case studies as well, and that helps them towards their endpoint assessment, because at the endpoint assessment they need to do a case study as well as a presentation, where they are asked questions on the actual presentation and the case study, and also on their portfolio as well. So I will help them. So right now with Chloe, Mollie, and the other cohort within this cohort, I'll be helping them gather that information that they've had throughout the whole 18 months to make sure that they are ready for their endpoint assessment. We'll also do a lot of mock presentations as well, and a lot of mock questioning as well, just to help them and prep them ready for the endpoint assessment.
That's incredible. And I think anyone who's worked in the DA sector knows the amount of information. I don't even think there's a way of describing it to people. I myself used to work for my local domestic abuse charity, and I was a victim voice facilitator. And when I say the amount of notes, I mean, by the end of it, my hand was hurting. If I'd gone out and done a visit and talking to people, you're talking a lot of information. And because for victims and survivors, that information is always shifting. If they're involved in lots of different systems and different services, etc., there's so much information for them to take in. So in terms of the apprenticeship and understanding all that, if you're coming in at it from that perspective of maybe you don't know all of that, then that's incredible that they're getting that one-to-one support, and that they understand from yourselves that how much information will come in and how much you have to then kind of disseminate and understand. Amazing. Matt, okay, so how is it going in terms of the perspective and insights from an employer? How's it all going?
Yeah, it's going great. I think I just wanted to touch back on, like Anna said earlier on, historically, these type of qualifications have been like shorter intensive courses, and they are still available. However, I think the benefit of this format, especially from a service provision perspective, is quite often when people do some academic learning to achieve a qualification, that then has to be followed by a period of observed practice, like on the job, which can lengthen, if you will, the kind of growth time of an employee to provide high level quality service. Whereas with the apprenticeship, obviously they're doing the academic, it might be slightly longer, but they're doing the academic learning and applying that in practice on a rolling as they go. So from an organisational perspective, you're seeing the quality of that knowledge acquisition in service provision on an incremental basis, and you're not having to wait until the end of that qualification to be able to see that. So it has it's got a dual benefit, really, especially, we're actively seeing the benefit of learners upskilling themselves as they are doing it in various different areas, which obviously the end goal is to be able to provide a better, more informed quality provision to the victims and survivors that we support, which ultimately we get that incrementally in a little bit quicker, which is great.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And in terms of an example of how the learning has kind of positively influenced work with survivors or colleagues, is there an example you could sort of give?
Yeah, I mean, a generic one, I think something that I've noticed is we all, whether we're doing a qualification or not, everybody picks up knowledge. Like you mentioned earlier, Lucy, in the DA sector, you can be learning lifelong. There's always something that you don't know. And reflection for the practitioners that have been doing it, I think a lot of, like Anna said, a lot of their journal hours that perhaps they are able to log and document as evidence of their learning might perhaps include some tasks that they've been doing for quite some time, but perhaps never actually reflected on it from an academic perspective and why they're doing it, or the research behind why they're doing it, and having to reflect on not just new learning, but things that they already know on a daily basis. Really promotes some really insightful conversations within the team, with survivors and with their line managers. It's been
amazing. And the thing is, I think as well, because we know with DA, it unfortunately it does evolve in terms of with digital harm now, etc. We always used to think of stalking and harassment a long time ago in terms of in person, etc. But now, especially when we think in terms of post-separation abuse, we have all the online issues and everything else that goes on. And like you say, having that deeper understanding, those deeper insights into these things, because it may be something that somebody hasn't thought of before. We think of, one of the classic kind of, well, why didn't they just leave? My response to all that is, well, why would you think they could? Why would you think somebody could? Why is it that straightforward and that simple? Like, you're not seeing it from that perspective because you think it couldn't happen to you. So like you say, getting those deeper insights and understandings is so important. Thank you. I'm loving this. This is such a different way of doing it, but I like it. But then I end up doing this and chatting in the middle, and I do get nice comments. People going, "I love it because I don't feel intimidated. It's just a chat." And so I don't know who wants to go first, Mollie or Chloe. But how are things going from your perspective?
Do you want me?
Do
you want me to go, Mollie?
Don't mind.
You're both so nice. I mean, I don't know. You go first.
Yeah, no, I don't mind going first. I think the biggest thing, I know I work really closely with Mollie, and I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed when working in this industry is actually the qualifications in this are really hard to access. So you're looking at the fact that they cost quite a lot of money, or it depends who you work for. We work for a local charity, so funding tends to be quite limited.
Yeah.
So even like looking at trying to become an IDVA, for example, you're looking at thousands of pounds, and it's probably coming out of your own pocket. So having this as an option, and I think there's a lot of things that Matt was saying that we definitely feel like having it over a longer period of time has actually been really, really successful, because I think I've been working in this industry now for just over 4 years. So I felt like, what else can I possibly learn? But it was more the kind of putting things that I did already know. There was definitely new learning. I'm not going to say I know absolutely everything. But it was kind of being able to put it into practice, but having the opportunity to look at the whys, the hows, how can we do it better? And empowering us to empower who we're working with. So I think that's been the biggest part of it. Even if we're not learning something new every single time we have a session, or the essays that we have done are previous learning, it's just being so confident that we know what we're doing, that we're able to face and be advocates, like, for the people going through, because they face so many challenges. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest things that I would say with this apprenticeship at the moment.
And I think I love that. And what I love about that is as well, I think you've touched on something really important there as well, is because you're dealing with obviously different situations and victims and survivors, etc., in terms of the model that you would be looking at, or people that you've worked with yourself, is each situation is unique to them. So there's so much learning to do, even though there's those threads that run throughout. I think very often I've said in episodes, I think abusers have like some kind of book somewhere that they all seem to tick boxes from. It's like a script, because then when I used to do group facilitation, and you'd get people in the room, they go, "Oh, that happened to me, but in a slightly different way. Oh no, but that happened." And so you could see the light bulb moments of, okay, so A, I'm not on my own, and B, there is a script, but then that script changes ever so slightly with each situation. I'd done an episode the other day with a lovely girl who's created an app called her Haven app. And we were talking about she'd been in 2 abusive relationships. And so for her, that shame factor of, "Oh, I didn't learn from the first time." And it's like, well, actually, it's not your fault, which we always say on this podcast. This is definitely not your fault. There is no shame and blame whatsoever. And so, but for her, because it was slightly different in each relationship, she didn't, for her, the kind of, as she calls them, the red flags weren't there, because it was slightly different that time. So I think for people to understand what you all do and how you go about it isn't as straightforward as just saying, "This is what the situation is, this is domestic abuse, and this is how it looks on a piece of paper." It doesn't. It's like when you're at school and you do those mind maps and they keep going on forever. Well, I never did them because I'm older than that, but anyway, my kids tell me about mind maps. But this idea of that kind of spider effect of it going on, and I think it's really important in this episode to make it clear to listeners that this is what you're kind of dealing with and working towards, working with people to understand all those kind of nuances that are very, very insidious. And Mollie, I feel like last but not least, Mollie again.
Yeah, I know. I'm always last in things because of my surname as well. I think as well, a bit like what Chloe said, because when you've got DA work, but then you've also got it for children.
Yes.
I think that's quite niche. I think a lot of the time when you think of DA, you think of adults. So I think already our role was quite specific and maybe not understood by other people in terms of understanding that children can be a victim. I think a lot of people have the stance of, well, they were upstairs, so the children aren't involved and all things like that. So I think having this qualification almost backs our role and backs our knowledge. So, like Chloe said, we did already have a lot of knowledge and kind of experience, but it's almost putting the pieces together of I do this in my job. Now I have this qualification, so I can kind of fulfill my role even better. And
It
it's
almost
just
validates
having
the
that
work, doesn't
backing.
it?
Yeah, it's just having that backing of that qualification to say, actually, no, this is why we do the work we do. This is why it's so important. So knowing that there was that qualification out there specifically for, so we did the children's pathway, that was kind of that validation of, no, like the work we do is important and it's needed. So having a recognised qualification for it has been really important for us because I think we kind of, within our team especially, we're always trying to advocate and do more things and find new ways to speak to children and families and all things like that. So this was just that extra stepping stone of kind of the validation of no, this is really important.
It is. It's and again, what I'm loving is it's like extra points. You've Chloe and Mollie are touching on such important points. And again, the CYP is obviously we say with children and young people services, they're really struggling in terms of funding, etc. And for me, very often, I have done episodes with CYP managers because, again, parents and society as a whole, when we look at it, as you say, they don't view victims as children. And yet the law now states that children are no longer witnesses, they are victims in their own right. And so all those kind of mechanisms and the long-term impact on children, and very often when I've had victims and survivors talking, they're not only dealing with their own shame and blame, they also feel a shame and blame that their children have experienced it, even though it's none of their fault. We go back to the abuser, lay the blame at the feet of the person it belongs to. But having that understanding for children, that is so, so important. And I think, the fact that you're doing all of that, and I think it's really important that if people didn't necessarily know in terms of the apprenticeship, that was part of it for a lot of people, that post-separation abuse element in terms of, well, I think now things are going to be okay. And then it carries on through the children for many, many, many years. And that's where we need to have that very deep understanding of that support because, and I often say this, and it's my podcast, so I can say what I like, but we go on at school about healthy relationships and all that's great. But, we need the conversation around domestic abuse. We need that age-appropriate conversation around what is a healthy relationship, but also what does domestic abuse look like in that setting? Because for children, if you've grown up in that, and exactly the same for a victim survivor adult, is that's your norm. Until you're out of that fog, if you like, that is your norm. And so when we're trying to explain it to society, it's a very, very difficult subject. But I love the fact that the children and young people are involved in the apprenticeship as well. I want to go and do it myself now.
Do you know what? I think
I wasn't doing 50,000 other things. I was.
Just in regards to that, Lucy, just what you were saying there, and I think Mollie, you've actually summed it up perfectly. But I don't know. I think I've worked with children since I've left university. I've always done it all with vulnerable people and families, and I think it's really one of the biggest challenges we face. If your work title says children, I think society automatically kind of there's less respect, there's less status, there's less, and that is reflected in pay. We're never paid if we haven't got the social worker title or the teacher title. A lot of that I think has been an ongoing battle. And then alongside that, working for a charity, I think being taken seriously is a real battle all the time. But I mean, our charity on its own, alongside the things that Mollie said, we do outreach, we do group work. From the children's perspective, we are trying so hard to get in and out of schools to help because a lot of teaching staff don't have the right training to deal with disclosures of domestic abuse. They don't know what to say. And I think it is about time that we are up in the status of what we do. That we're working with the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable little babies in some cases. So I think having more opportunities to do qualifications like this is only going to help with that. But yeah, I think it was just really important to say that, because I think sometimes you'll say, oh, I work with adults, you work with children, and it's almost like the adult worker gets more respect. We
Yeah.
have to fight a bit more.
Yeah, I
I
totally
think
agree. I did a stint of working around children and young people as well, because I was trying to work out which area I was going to be working in, etc. And I think that it's very, very difficult for people to understand the impact that someone can have, that positive impact someone can have on a child's life. And when we talk about emotional intelligence now, and for a child to be able to, or a young person to be able to say, actually, that's not acceptable,
Hmm.
and be able to, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps even just saying it now, I'm not going to lie. It is that empowerment that you're giving children and young people. And that to me is, well, it's worth, if I could pay you, I would. I'm a C.I.C, so
I
God.
just wanted to say, just on what Chloe was saying, off the back of what Chloe was saying, and I 100% agree with you. And within the sessions with some of the other cohorts, we often talk about how, well, they often talk about how sometimes if they're working in refuge, for example, they're not invited to come to Maraks or platforms like that where they can advocate for the victims. And I'm always saying to them to actually ask to, to be able to sit on that Marak panel or that MASH panel, for example, because the victim more, you're able to advocate for that victim so much more. So I'm always saying to push for yourselves to get on there, because a lot of them say that they feel that they're not invited, that they're seen as less than, or they're seen as support workers, and they're not really given much respect really in the professional world.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree more. And I think if we are ever going to tackle domestic abuse, then there's a quote I love, and I think it's Desmond Tutu. He says, we've got to stop jumping in the stream where we are. We have to go further up and see where people are falling in. And if we're not looking at the children and young people, if we're not advocating for them, and the irony is, children are pretty good, especially in this day and age. Now they're very mature. They know a lot more than we give them credit for, and they see a lot more. And so if they're given that empowerment to understand that actually their voice is being heard, the voice of the child, we know that in the family courts now. And I mean, to me, that's my personal opinion. I think 12 is too late. I think sometimes younger, they're able to understand these things themselves and what they're experiencing. But at least, we're moving in that direction. But I totally agree. I think people being able to advocate for those children who are that next generation, and if we are tackling it, then that has to be a huge, huge focus, definitely. Oh, well, this has been fast becoming one of my favourite episodes.
I think picking up on what you said as well, Chloe, around the perception of other professionals around people who work in the CYPDA sector. In like anecdotally in some of my services, I think that the children's workers, that their work is in some ways a lot tougher than the adult workers, especially if like you mentioned, we're working with the most vulnerable groups in society, and quite often they're not fully cognitively developed. They might not have the language to be able to express or engage in whatever session it is that you're doing with them. So you have to work at trying to pull that information from them very innovatively. 90%, although they're going through trauma, 90% of the adult survivors that we work with will probably be able to verbalize and articulate their experiences. Whereas with that younger demographic, that's generically not the case. And you've got to use so much initiative to be able to extract the information that you need to be able to understand what they've been through. And I think that's a real challenge that is often overlooked.
I think you're right. I think as well with the timings, and like you say, the apprenticeship taking that the time around that, timing is everything. From 1 week, what a child has understood, and maybe needs a bit more. They're like sponges, aren't they? They take everything, but they need a bit more time to understand that situation. And the one thing I always say is, it's really difficult for children, isn't it? Like they love both parents, and sometimes I get looked at like I'm an absolute nutter for saying that. But you're like, but they're children, regardless of who the safe parent is, regardless of who the abuser, they want to love, and that's their inner core, is that's what they want to do. And over time, if they can put those boundaries in place, but they need that support and they need that understanding to know that that's acceptable. And that's one of the biggest things I say is, if a behavior isn't acceptable, you can love somebody by all means, but you don't have to like that behavior and you don't have to accept that behavior. But it's knowing how to talk to children. Like you're right, there's a very different way of talking to children and young people than there is in talking to adults. So the apprenticeship covering all of that, I mean, that's that's the wraparound, isn't it? It's all of it. We're not just focusing on the adults, it's the children and young people as well. So amazing. Does anybody have anything they want to add? I think we could go on all day.
I think that no, and I think that's really why the apprenticeship was designed, is to give those additional skills, but to embed that over time and then have a chance to reflect. It's all about, how can you do that better? What have we done now? What didn't work? And just reflecting on that practice, and that's what makes people develop in the role. The other thing, obviously, that the apprenticeship is designed to do is to create that succession planning within businesses. So too often not we hear about people doing these short courses, they get the qualification, they move on. I think from moving on from what Matt said, that career development, that succession planning within services, that's how the apprenticeship can help. It's an 18-month program. They're going to be engaged, they're going to be committed. They've got all this extensive journaling that they're doing, so they get out of their roles a little bit and see different aspects of the work or potentially different departments. So it really gives them a bit of an eye opener as to what next. So, if you've got, more senior roles that are available, use that apprenticeship to get them the initial training, but develop from within. So ultimately a cost saving. And one key thing I wanted to get across today was obviously the funding. We hear about it day in, day out, right now, current climate, funding cuts, services not getting contracts reviewed. The apprenticeship is fully funded through the government's levy scheme. So if you are a large employer, you'll be taxed by the government anyway, and that sits in your digital levy account. But as a smaller business, how do you access that? So there is a lot of large companies out there that are willing to gift unspent levy. And that's a real opportunity for charity-based organisations, smaller SMEs, a lot of the organisations that will be in the Women's Aid network as well. And we can help with that, where to source that from. So the apprenticeship is £8,000 worth of training.
Amazing.
But it can be fully funded. So all the delivery and assessment is covered in that. And that's something that I've been doing regularly at the front end of the apprenticeship rollout, is to advise and guide employers on that, where to access it. And it's been an absolute delight to see so many smaller organisations access this funding. Millions unspent each year that goes back to the Treasury. That is available. And we've got quite a few of our the employers that we work with that actually have unspent levy that are absolutely willing to invest in this area. It's so topical at the minute and it's forever in the news every day. And they're really keen to support funding. So if that's something that, we can help with through the apprenticeship, it's an amazing opportunity. And that's a key issue that we hear all the time, is there's no funding for training. It's always on the back seat, but that's what keeps people in the sector. That's what's developing the sector. So it's a real opportunity for a lot of employers out there to access the full funding. It's a win-win.
I think I need to be putting in the notes when I release it. Fully funded, people.
You do, please do, because that's the biggest message that's out there, is that people think, oh, I've got to pay thousands for this, and you haven't. There is funding out there, and at Pier we can help support with you allocating that and walking through the whole process. But it's a real key thing to mention that is a real blocker for a lot of organisations out there, is funding the training.
Yeah, definitely. We hear that word. It's like a dirty word. And the word funding here.
I know. Terrible at the minute.
I will make that very, very clear. It is fully funded. And that, like I say, for anybody who understands that, which we all do here, that is amazing.
Just another point, sorry, as well, is I'm inundated every day with people inquiring about the apprenticeship, but they're not in a role. So a large portion of my job at the minute is to advise and guide on how to get into it. And obviously, most of these people have lived experience, and that's why they want to give back. So again, it's another opportunity we're working with a number of employers now, but just that connecting piece, there will be vacancies available for ISVA roles, support roles, but it might be that they come in and start at a lower level and then progress up. And there's a lot of employers actually that are looking now and thinking, we've got an opportunity, we've got a vacancy. could we actually fill that by taking an apprentice on that's got an understanding of the area? The lived experience is always a key benefit, and actually train that person up using the apprenticeship, and eventually they can become fully qualified at a national level. So there's lots of different routes in. Obviously, we work with existing employees. Obviously, Chloe and Mollie were already existing in the business. But if you're looking to get into this sector, it's another route to explore.
That's really important to
So
mention.
yeah,
So I do know a lot of people who will, they will say in terms, even the podcast, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do what you're doing. But I'm just so glad I had that grounding beforehand of volunteering, then working for my local
yeah,
charity. But at the time, obviously, there wasn't things like this that I could have potentially looked at and gone, actually, that might be for me. And it's, we know lived experience is so important. We know how much emphasis is being put on lived experience, but also that professional being able to, if you like, separate out the two. So to have the compassion, but also have that knowledge and understanding so that you can put the two together. It's so, so important. But amazing. If only it had been around about 10 years ago, I'd have been all right.
I know. This is the thing.
The whole
But I
life
mean,
could have been different. I couldn't
it's
have been doing
growing
this in
massive.
and out.
Sign you up, it's no problem.
I know.
Well, I
No.
was going to say, it's, recruitment, Lucy, I'm sure that there's hundreds of organisations that would snap you up if you wanted some diversification in your career at this stage.
Well, thank you very much. I love this. Right. Well, we sorted me out, so we're all good.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
dear.
the apprenticeship, obviously, there is a caveat. There is no higher age limit, but it is, from the awarding organisation, they're sort of saying anyone from 18 plus because of the nature of the work that you are
Yeah.
dealing with. But we have a lot of people that are graduates that are coming out from perhaps doing other degrees in a related area that are looking to get into this. So that is a requirement, but no higher limit. And obviously, there could be people that have been working in the sector for years. Actually, are you being effective in that role? You
Yeah.
know, have you got a formal qualification? It just might be that you've had the experience for years. So a complete range of learners that can come through to this, from those fresh in to those that are looking to sort of revisit, recap, refresh, and potentially develop those careers that it can support.
I
And
think
Um,
that
sorry,
sorry.
carry on. No,
I
go,
think
go.
I think that highlights it as well, because I think we in our organisation we have a lot of conversations around sometimes maybe feeling frustrated that other agencies or professionals don't have the knowledge or the understanding. So the fact that people are coming from degrees and choosing to do it just shows that this is filling the gap, because there are gaps and people are leaving university or jobs where they still don't have the DA knowledge that should be there. And that actually, that I think there is more to be done in terms of when people are doing degrees. I think, some people have half an hour of DA, lessons and that's it. So I feel like that kind of highlights it, the fact that people are completing degrees and still doing DA qualifications shows the importance of it. And I think more organisations need to do things like this so that staff are completely confident in what they know and they can apply it, because a lot of the jobs now you're going to be faced with even more victims than ever.
Yeah.
So it's having that, even teaching staff, it's having that understanding of actually I can effectively support this victim. It's not just basic safeguarding training that I need, that needs to be more. So I think that kind of highlights the need for it.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mollie. It's one of our biggest frustrations. I think we work with, I think even now, I still sometimes go into schools and get really intimidated by the head teacher. I'm like, go back to being a child. I'm like, ugh. But they actually, that we'll go and people are looking at us like we don't know. And I think that's really disappointing that certain degrees, certain, jobs, shall we say, that don't have in-depth training, because of the statistics of how many, not just speaking about children and young people, in every angle, every aspect, the statistics of those that experience domestic abuse are so scarily high that it's it is quite mind-blowing that they're not having more in depth. And it's almost like we want to get rid of that. Well, that's not my job. No, it is your job, because there's going to be a lot of children, young people in one classroom that have experienced it to some degree. And if not, their parents, carers have. And that impacts indirectly to the children we're working with. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, Molly, because I was itching. I thought it
No,
needs to
you
be
mentioned
done.
it.
Yeah.
It
And
does need to be done.
One of the other apprenticeships that we launched not long after the domestic abuse one actually was a safeguarding support officer, and that's at a level 3. And it does make a really nice career progression, because that is perfectly positioned for the likes of schools, NHS, any organisation where they're dealing with safeguarding, but it includes children and adults. And that can be, instead of doing a degree route, a viable route to do the apprenticeship. So you're in the job, getting paid, learning while you're earning, as cheesy as it sounds. But the safeguarding level 3 is perfectly positioned for someone that wants that extra knowledge to be able to deal with frontline triaging. So what we're finding at the minute is we are getting quite a few that are doing that, and then a progression would be the domestic abuse apprenticeship if they want to sort of really go down that route. So there's a great little career path in the apprenticeship world. Not having to go to university, and you're always putting that knowledge straight into practice and reflection. And it's that piece that I think a lot of apprentices really find beneficial, and ultimately get to their end point in their career probably a lot quicker, because they're not having to get the knowledge and then start at the bottom with the actual practice in the job.
Just on that, I've got doing the safeguarding apprenticeship. I've got a couple learners who are admin workers within the NHS, and what they're doing is they're getting shadowing opportunities where they attending Marac and MAPA, where they've never had the opportunity to before. So just getting that experience and knowing a little bit more around the typologies around domestic abuse.
Yeah,
so
definitely. And what's really interesting, I'm loving how we've kind of led into all this, is all the different areas, talking about NHS, schools. I mean, I think we all know, and I think everyone's going to nod at the same time, family courts. If there was a bit more training than half an hour with the family courts, in terms of whether you were a Mackenzie friend, whether you were a lawyer, a solicitor, a legal exec, whoever, the amount of understanding that needs to go on within that family court framework is so
Well, watch
important.
this space. We are looking at short courses from April that might be, the levy is changing, and it may be that you can use levy funding to fund short programs, and that's something that we're looking at potentially doing, is some shorter courses for the likes of those in that area as well.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, I've done a few episodes now with various family solicitors, and those are the episodes I get a lot of comments, a lot of people going, oh my God, yes, oh my God, yes. And because I think as well, it's something that has gone on for a long, long time, many, many years, it's that understanding that needs to be there in a system where we're dealing with adults and the children, and it can be that it's going back and back and back again and again and again, and we're not solving the problem if we haven't got that understanding and knowledge in the apprenticeships and all the things that could be done to help those individuals have a better understanding so that they can work from that point of view. Yeah, definitely.
One thing to add to that, and I think, again, I know everyone has said it, but because we've mentioned court system now.
It's all right. I mentioned it. It's me. It's my.
Yeah, I mean, I really could talk about it for a very, very, very long time. But I think when you learn about family court, when you learn about the criminal civil justice system, on paper, you would look at it and go, wow, that's brilliant. This is really good. It's going to protect these people. It's going to do all these things. But I will say, and I know Molly will agree with me, the families that we are having referred to our service in particular, I know this is a case everywhere, it's not just Northamptonshire, are so complex, and the complexities are coming from the court system. We're having, and you obviously have the 3 planets model where they're all so separate, but the advice you get from one system is actually really frowned upon by another system. So you've got a victim survivor desperate to safeguard their children. They'll go to court, for example, and everything they've been previously advised, they actually get penalised for.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with the apprenticeship, don't get me wrong, I think you've got to do a lot of self-care during it, because a lot of the sessions go into
Yes, it's a
quite
good point.
depth.
Yeah, yeah,
But also, when you're working alongside it, it does have the potential to highlight your frustrations. But on the flip side, I think the development of knowledge and the understanding of how those systems do work,
yeah,
we are providing that information. We obviously can't give legal advice, but we can kind of say, this is what you can expect. But we
yes,
also learn a
yeah,
few little tricks that actually this helps. Like, make sure you're logging everything. Make sure that even if
yeah,
you feel like you're being an absolute nuisance, if you're so drained, you don't have the energy, you've got to keep doing it. And I
yes,
think being a practitioner or professional that can be that person that can keep them going,
mhm,
that the challenges they're going to face, they're going to have things that really knock them back a peg or
yeah,
two. Like, it's one of the hardest jobs I think I've ever done, and it is only getting harder. But to have learned about all those systems, but then you're like, but that's not the reality.
yeah,
The benefit of it being over such a longer period of time rather than these intense courses,
yes, yeah,
we've got opportunities to ask questions. We are given the opportunity to know what these professionals actually want from us as
yeah,
well. So that I think it just is that multi-agency working, which is so it's just so still separate within domestic abuse, which
yeah.
you then it's like near on impossible sometimes to help these families because they've all got to combine to pick up everything.
Yes. A
Um,
marathon, not a sprint, as I always say.
yeah, and
It's
it
a
is, and I
marathon.
think it's anyone that has worked with anyone, or even in personal life, that has been around someone who has directly experienced domestic abuse. Just for example, the the difficulty with trying to evidence stuff, for just even them speaking out about it, for the
Yeah,
person receiving it
yeah,
to know what trauma-informed practice is, for one
yes,
thing.
yeah,
Um, it's just an absolute, in my opinion, battlefield. So this has created, I think, and I know I've spoken to Molly about it a few times, it's that level of confidence in our own voice that
yes,
then essentially can filter through to the parents, carers, adults, but also the children.
yeah,
And I
amazing.
think court systems, we talk about the age there, that I'm with you with that. You'll get 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds that know
No,
what they want. They
yeah,
know we're teaching them, helping them who's safe, what's safe. This
yeah,
doesn't make me feel safe. We give them that voice. And
yeah,
then we're almost finding we've got to teach the resilience to go, you might
go,
not get heard this
yeah.
time,
But you're
but
just gonna
what
have to
can we
deal with it.
do?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's giving
yeah,
them that voice to go, but I'm going to keep saying it. I am going to keep doing it. And
amazing.
that's the most powerful bit, that adults or children, you're going to get told we can't help you so many times, but keep saying it out loud, shout it.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think it's that. I think being realistic and that reality of it, and especially for both you and Molly, is again, I'll highlight it. It's that emotional impact, not just on the victims and survivors, adults and children. It's on yourselves, and
Mm,
anyone again who's worked in this area knows that you can come home for a day's work and go, I'm exhausted isn't the word, mentally, physically, etc. And it's those things that last. So having, we're talking about a role here where you're dealing with people's lives every day. And of course, if you're doing this role, I don't think you can do it effectively if you don't have compassion. And clearly you both
mhm.
do. It's obvious, it shines out of the pair of you. And I think you need that compassion to be able to support people. But then at the same time, it's looking after yourself so you can
Yeah,
continue that. And it is that sort of self-care element, isn't it, of going, I need to look after others. But obviously the apprenticeship is doing all of this, and you're able to look deeper and go, okay, well, now I understand X, Y, and Z, and be able to give that support, but also receive the support yourself. Because
yeah,
it's not an easy topic. As much as I sit here and most people go, oh, you make it really easy to talk about. And that's the whole reason I started this, because I didn't want it being this taboo subject where it's like, oh, no, no, we can't talk about that. But actually, it is a very deep topic. I did a talk before Christmas, and a lady came up to me and went, oh, well, that was, bearing in mind this is me talking, so I'm obviously not going to be all like doom and gloom. And she was like, it was very deep, it was very deep. And, it's a Christmas party afterwards. And I was like, well, I'm really sorry, but I was asked to talk. So there you go. But then somebody else came up and went, oh my God, you just explained my childhood and I'm 25. And then had like a 2 hour conversation with this person. So we can't shy away from these conversations just because one person might say, that was a bit deep for me. I wanted to then ask, well, why? But I thought, better not. It's a Christmas party now. Just
I don't think you can have a conversation that's not deep on this topic. But
Yeah.
like any conversation that you have surrounding domestic abuse, it's going to be gritty. And I think if it's not gritty, you're not doing the topic justice.
No.
Because you're fluffing it up, and society has fluffed it up for God knows how many years.
Yeah.
We can't continue to do that. You've got to have those gritty, real conversations, like you were just saying, Lucy.
Yeah, it's so
It's the
important.
reality.
It is the reality. And I think, we have to accept that. And if I can, hopefully, with things like the podcast, draw people into that conversation, and then they go, oh, okay, so I'm in it now, and now I'm listening, and okay, so I do get where you're coming from. But I think that's so important. And I think the way that Mollie and Chloe are clearly approaching it through the apprenticeship is absolutely fantastic. And it's what's needed, because it has been a subject that's been misunderstood for so, so long. And people haven't wanted to understand it because it's like, well, it doesn't impact me. And I always say to people, it impacts all of us on one level or another. You either know someone, and very often when people say it doesn't impact me, I'm like, well, that makes me very curious as to why you think it wouldn't impact you. That makes me very curious. We all know somebody at some point in our lives, and maybe we find out 20 years down the line it was ourselves. The historic abuse for a lot of people that comes up very often in episodes I've done. People go, I had an incredible message recently from someone that went, I'd never heard of post-separation abuse. I didn't know it existed. I just thought it happened during the relationship and that was it. I didn't realize this is something that continues on, and it's an area I'm massively passionate about. But it is important that we make sure we have these conversations and do things like this. I've loved every minute of this. Now, I'm going to ask everybody if they want to do, I don't normally do this, but there's so many of you and I've loved every minute. But if anyone wants to give a little bit of, not necessarily advice, because I always find that a bit trite, but something that you feel is important to share, whether it's about the apprenticeship, whether it's about whatever, please feel free if you want to take it in turns.
Well, I go. Go on, Matt, you go first.
All right, okay. I think the term "it's not a destination, it's a journey" kind of applies to multiple areas in the conversations that we've had today. There isn't a solution or a final recovery destination for a domestic abuse. It's a lifetime journey, and I think similarly, working in domestic abuse is not a destination. It's a lifetime journey. Like we talked about, this apprenticeship is doing a real lot for skill acquisition for people, but I think you never know everything. And you're never going to know everything. You could be the most qualified DA practitioner in the world and still go to work and experience something that you never thought you'd experience. So it's a continuous journey, not a destination.
Oh, I love that.
Very nice. Very nice. No, I just think, obviously, I just want to wish Chloe and Mollie the best of luck, because they will be the first nationally to go through this apprenticeship. So no pressure, but we expect great things. Have a bit of pressure on, but yeah, going through to assessments imminently. So it will be amazing to celebrate their achievements as the first ones going through it. Obviously, to continue working with our amazing employer partners, SafeNet have been brilliant in providing, so many of their team have come through. And obviously, with Women's Aid as well, to continue our working relationship, whether it be promoting it, networking, and most importantly, making sure that the apprenticeship is being delivered as it was intended to be, and that it's kept current, with current legislation and updates. And we've got opportunities to enrol every month. So cohorts running every month. So let's spread the word, really, and get some more
and get it on
training and development.
Send me the links and I'll get it on Dipcast on resources.
Absolutely.
I think, I know I've already said it, biggest bit of advice, especially if you're working in it and then doing a learning course on it or whatever, massively, you've got to look after yourself. I think the one thing I will really say is like I work very closely with Molly, and if I didn't have people like her or the rest of our team, we've got a really good team currently at NDAS that are just extremely supportive. Like we're going to peer support today, we're going to make sure that we meet up. And I think at the very beginning of the apprenticeship, I went in hard. I was researching, and actually it consumed me. I was looking at every single documentary I possibly could on the history side of it, patriarchy. I was looking at misogyny, all of it, and I got very overwhelmed very quickly. So we have regular check-ins. We always have monthly reviews, if you like, and it was a conversation I had where she was like, "Whoa, stop." Like, and I think when you're passionate and you do these kind of jobs, there is this weird thing about you that you then look at every single documentary on TV, and you're doing it from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. And that's the kind of thing you've kind of got to stop. Like, I've learned to watch something quite nice now before I go to bed, not just about sort of murder documentaries and domestic abuse.
Yeah.
But you need a team around you. I think there are lots of reasons why people get into this industry. A lot of them, like we have spoken about, are because of your own personal journey. No matter how much you think you're over that, or you've moved on from that, or even close family and friends, there's loads of stuff that will get to you. And I think it's having really strong boundaries, but also having people around that you can get through it. I'm making it sound like it's absolutely terrifying. It's not.
Not at
It's
all.
made everything more passionate, actually, but then you've got to be really,
Balance
really
it.
careful
Yeah.
that it's not every minute of the day, which I did find I was doing. But I've got my Molly, we've got that working
Oh.
relationship.
Oh,
Like we just message each other like, oh my goodness. But that's what's important. I think
Yeah.
that's the bit from a working perspective, that you have got your own support network, not just advising
So
everybody
true.
else to have
Yes,
one.
definitely, 100%. Yeah. Anybody else? You just have to. I feel like I'm group facilitating now. You don't have to go. Don't want to. No pressure.
Sorry, go on, Molly.
I was going to say, it's actually, if people do it, I think when you hear about it, like even just on this podcast, you think, oh God, it might be quite a lot, but it's actually the way it's broken down and spread out, it's actually not intense, given what it's about as well.
Yeah.
At no point did I think I'm drowning in it. I didn't think, the workload was very manageable, because you hear the word essay and think, oh God, that's going to take me forever and things like that, or presentation. But the way it's done makes it really kind of relaxed in a way. It makes it really manageable. And I think it puts people off doing things like this, because they'll think, how am I going to do it alongside doing my job?
Yeah.
Or things like that. But actually it was easier to have boundaries with it. So it was easier to say, actually, I'm doing it in my designated hours. I'm not going to do it in this time. So I think that's something to say, because I think some people would be put off by apprenticeships thinking I won't have the time to do it.
Like children or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
We did it in our working hours. We were given that time. Here's your allocated hours. So I think it is a lot more manageable than people, I think, would probably assume. So that would be my advice.
And you're actually, sorry, I know I've asked you all to say something, I'm jumping in again, but what I've just thought in my head then is, you're obviously talking about how much in terms of the victims and survivors, but the families will benefit, in terms of their external families, who very often we know that they don't understand necessarily, or how to say things in a way that isn't, well, I could have told you that, or didn't you see that? We know all that language doesn't help, but you're helping the families, and your families will see what you're doing. I want to jump in now and come, but it's a bit late. But you can
We've
tell.
had a lot of feedback actually from other learners on program that have said not only did it help them within their daily job, but actually how much of that they took home to it, and it's impacted how they dealt with family, friends, even giving advice. Which again, what a benefit from doing that and learning all that information.
Huge, absolutely huge. And if we don't have to, if we don't want to, anybody else now? Are we all good?
Well, I was just going to jump in quickly, sorry. And it's kind of picking up on what Chloe and Molly have both said, but it's kind of more broadly about training and just, advising people just to seek out every opportunity to learn, because, even if you think you know everything, actually that opportunity to connect with others in the sector and build those relationships is invaluable. And the opportunity to take time out of the day job to think and reflect, that's priceless, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely. I love that. That's that's perfect. It is. It's been an absolutely amazing episode. I've loved every minute. It's been wonderful. I feel like I could do it all day, but I've got to go and record something else this afternoon. Save my voice. But no, I can't thank you all enough. And I really genuinely know myself that something like this is so important, and so important, like I say, not just for those who are involved, for the outer community in terms of family, friends, victims, survivors, children, and for systems to learn from what you're learning is invaluable. Couldn't put a price tag on it. You couldn't. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining me this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having us.
When you look at me, what